I must begin with a trigger warning. Sacred cows will be toppled in this podcast episode. The Allure of Cynical Philosophers. This is a breed of philosophers who, when reading their works, I do understand what they are saying, but I see no point in what they are saying. I've become convinced that the intention of this breed of philosophers is not to make a point, but merely to fling rhetorical mud. In that, this breed is not really made up of philosophers because they aren't searching for truths or trying to build a better life. They trade instead in snark and gloom. They are professional cynics. Merriam-Webster defines a cynic as, quote, a fault-finding, captious critic, unquote. These trendy cynics are selling the message that life is dreadful, society is horrible, everyone is stupid, we're all just doomed. Just don't ask them for any solutions. These philosophers, or pseudo-philosophers, are only there to complain about problems and blame everyone else for them. And yet, there is something in the human psyche that gravitates toward gloom, doom, and eternal cynicism. If you can bundle cynical fatalism into an attractive package, you can make money off of it. Just look at Ryan Holiday, though he at least tries to polish the turd of Stoic fatalism. Not so for these cynical philosophers, or more accurately again, pseudo-philosophers, for whom trying to be positive is seen as a character flaw. A good philosopher is willing to identify the negative aspects of life and call them out, but most importantly, attempts to find positive solutions. In an age when the laziness of cynical finger-pointing is on trend, especially with young people, I'm willing to identify and call out 3 of today's cynical philosophers and offer a solution to the surface allure of their rhetoric. First up, Jordan Peterson. Long-time pseudo-psychologist, now former psychologist, Peterson is a snake oil salesman hawking cynicism and blame. His brand of professional cynicism is an odd mixture of right-wing political rhetoric and New Age self-help mantras. He has been trying to walk a fine line of being vehemently anti-woke while peddling woke self-improvement cliches. Society is sick, Peterson says. It is chaos. He places the blame for society's degradation on the usual target of reactionary ire, liberals, who Peterson often refers to as the woke mob. Like a televangelist, Peterson rails against the sins of the left, who, he claims, make it impossible for decent people to form healthy identities or function. He seems especially phobic about any suggestion that masculinity can be other than his preferred dispassionate aloofness. His phobia is often expressed as railings against trans-identity politics, which he often places at the center of the woke mob. Peterson portrays himself as a defender of true masculinity, with strong insinuations of male supremacy and hints of white supremacy. He denies the latter, but not the former. He cynically but passionately believes in a stark gender hierarchy of course, men over women. It's no wonder Peterson has eager followers within the incel and MAGA online communities. Peterson clothes all of his fear and loathing in the guise of being an upright conservative intellectual, a master of all he surveys. Few people are as austere and condescending as Peterson is. Maybe it's his way of expressing his manhood that fits within his overall messaging of obliviousness masquerading as power, being a bro. In essence, Peterson is not a conservative, but a libertarian. He focuses on personal responsibility to the extreme that one is not responsible to others. This sounds on the surface like pop psychology, But in adopting the personal responsibility mantra to the extent that Peterson does, no one is then allowed to criticize your choices because you answer to no one but yourself. Some have observed that Peterson's views are similar to Ayn Rand's, an observation that angers him. Perhaps Peterson sees himself as more in the Robert Nozick mode of libertarian right-wing ideology. The problem with Peterson isn't so much his fierce hatred of everything left of center. It's that in what he says, there is no there. His famous book, 12 Platitudes for Avoiding Life, he prefers that we call it 12 Rules for Life, is feather-light in substance and threadbare in wisdom. It's rehashed self-help woke buzzwords spiced with right-wing superciliousness. He says, suffering is built into the structure of being, and happiness is not something to be aimed at. It may sound like Stoic or Buddhist pessimism, but in Peterson's book, as in everything else he produces, he's never far from spouting right-wing cynicism. Society is sick, he says, because it has diverged from natural social hierarchies and the sharp division of gender roles. He offers no substantive solutions, only complaints about the left and empty advice like stand up straight and control your kids' behavior. Peterson rattles on with lots of words, often multisyllabic words chained together in long sentences with recondite references. Peterson is what an ignorant person thinks a learned person sounds like. He has a good memory for minutiae, so when anyone pushes back on his empty rhetoric, he can quickly come back with an arcane, acerbic retort. He never takes his own advice to, and I quote him, assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. Second, in the Cynical Philosophers, is Slavoj Žižek. Žižek is allegedly from Slovenia, but I find that difficult to believe because Slovenia is such a beautiful country filled with happy people. Maybe Žižek is inherently contrary. Actually, yes, he is inherently contrary. That seems to be the point of him. He is a professional cynic, a dour and schlumpy sourpuss. Žižek's cynical ramblings include such banal admonitions as, I paraphrase here, without theory, you don't know what you're doing, and you are not only responsible for what you know, but also for what you don't know. Žižek casts a constant shadow of condescension whenever he writes, and especially in his public appearances. He often seems mildly annoyed that he has to share the world with other people. I'll try not to be snide, that's Žižek's job, but my problem with Žižek is that he dispenses oft-repeated one-liners like, we are living in an age of naivete. Such truism, that one is true of every age, are useful only as platitudes, but do nothing to reveal real issues or solve real problems. Žižek is like a Lucasian Jordan Peterson. If Žižek believed in virtues, he could write a book on them, cloning Peterson's hubristic tome. But Žižek doesn't believe in virtues, or much else other than his own smug cynicism. All of you who believe in values and sentiments are naive, dupes of the system, he would say. All politics is fantasy, Žižek claims. That doesn't stop him from continually making his own political judgments that others' politics are wrong, or suggesting that anti-democratic actions are good if he agrees with the targets of the suppression of those anti-democratic actions. Žižek is as austere and condescending as Peterson, but about different things. For Peterson, the woke mob is everywhere. For Žižek, neo-fascism is everywhere. The specter of neo-fascism is haunting Europe, he writes, trying to channel Karl Marx and Joseph Engels. And he's not entirely wrong. But rather than confront the realities that generated this specter, Žižek goes fascist hunting among the people. Listening to a Žižek lecture or interview, to be fair more than in his written works, one gets the impression that he feels fascists are behind every bush, and everyone deep down wants to be a fascist too. Or maybe it's all just word games for Žižek, as he seems to enjoy grim innuendos and joie de mots. A particularly annoying aspect of Žižek is that he imagines he is funny. He's like your old crusty relative who constantly makes wisecracks about other people that never make as much sense as he believes they do. The worst thing about Žižek, though, is that he sees ideology in everything. Ideological distortion is written into the very essence of reality, he claims in his book, The Sublime Object of Ideology. He goes beyond the neo-Marxist notion of an ideological superstructure to the idea that every facet of reality is ideology, and so is every person in it. Everything is ideology, he claims, and everyone is lying about it. But how could we not, he continues, because no values, ideals, or principles are real. What is ideology, you may ask? Everything, is Žižek's answer. Even laughter and sarcasm are embroiled in ideology, he says, because everyone is guilty of being naive, because of the ubiquitous ideology. Everyone except Žižek, of course. If you can see the ideology, you're no longer in it, he says. He means himself, of course. He sees through it all, sitting like a lump, constantly making wisecracks about how naive other people are, believing his condescension and cynicism are enlightened humor. The third in my list, and potentially the most controversial, is Noam Chomsky. Way back in 1957, Chomsky wrote a book, Syntactic Structures, in which he outlined a theory of generative grammar. His book became to the study of linguistics what Bertrand Russell and Alfred North Whitehead's Principia Mathematica was to analytic positivism, a dense and opaque but influential and foundational work. With Syntactic Structures and several follow-up works, Chomsky cemented his place in analytic philosophy as one of the reductionists who believes that we are, to a great extent, controlled by internal language structures. But in the late 1960s, Chomsky wrote several essays condemning the Vietnam War. Deservedly, his essays were well received, and he became one of the intellectual celebrities speaking out against the American war machine. Over the ensuing decades, beginning with his 1969 book, American Power and the New Mandarins, Chomsky increasingly focused less and less on the philosophy of linguistics and more on political theory. He has been a leading voice against governmental abuses of economic and military power up to and including genocide. Chomsky has also been a leading voice against colonialism, including his brave stance against the Israeli occupation of Palestine and Israeli atrocities against Palestinian people. Nevertheless, Chomsky is a cynic, and a pedantic and repetitive one at that. Chomsky's criticisms are more on point than Žižek's, and certainly not the reactionary fantasies of Peterson. But like them, Chomsky also never moves beyond complaining and finger-pointing. Žižek's go-to bugbear is neo-fascism. Chomsky's go-to bugbear is imperialism. Chomsky's message is simple. The imperialists run everything and ruin everything. Thus, everything is crap. For a long time now, Chomsky has been like a wind-up toy. Place him in front of a microphone, flip the on switch, and stand back as he condemns everyone and everything as imperialist. Everything is propaganda, he claims, and everyone is controlled by it. Except him, of course. It's the same material again and again and again and again, and always devoid of discussion of underlying causes and of concrete solutions. What do these three cynics have in common? And what's the solution to their nonsense? A cynic is best defined as someone who sees little to no hope for a better future, blames others for all the bad things, and offers no solutions. Peterson, Žižek, and Chomsky fit that definition. But these three, and others of their breed, have devoted followings. Cynicism is easy. Hopefulness is hard-earned and requires effort to maintain. That's why these three professional cynics adopted the methodology they personify, and it's why each has his own cult-like followings. Why bother to do the work to build a better world? It's easier to listen to the Pied Piper, nod in agreement, and march along feeling smugly cynical. The solution, of course, is to not be cynical, to point out the negativity, of course, but to then move to trying to solve the problems, not just sit there and complain. Because not everything is crap. Not everything is imperialism. Not everything is the woke mob. Not everything is neo-fascism. There is also love. There is also hope. For saying all these truths, Peterson would say, I'm not a real man. Žižek would say, I'm deluded by neo-fascist ideology. And Chomsky would say, I've fallen for imperialist propaganda. Of course, they feel that about you, too.